They called her a paper soldier the moment she walked in. Said she probably fought keyboards, not enemies. But when the tape on her wrist slipped and the faint burn marks showed through, silence rippled across the room. Those weren't tattoos. And she wasn't here to prove herself. She was here because she always belonged. The arrival. The sun had barely touched the fence line when Sergeant Evelyn Kane pushed through the double doors of Building 12 at Fort Halloway. The air inside hit her like a memory, that mix of industrial disinfectant and sweat ground deep into rubber mats. The base gym smelled the same no matter where you were stationed, Fort Bragg, Benning, or here. The kind of scent that clung to ambition, routine, and the iron weight of discipline. Fluorescent bulbs buzzed overhead, too harsh, too sterile, casting everyone in a glow that made faces look either too young or too old. At 43, Kane walked with the economy of someone who had no wasted motion left in her body. Her hair was pulled tight under a weathered army cap. Her t-shirt was faded, the logo washed to near invisibility, but the ghost of old creases still whispered military precision. Her boots weren't inspection shiny, but the leather carried the miles of ground that never made it into manuals. She didn't swagger. She didn't posture. She moved with quiet purpose, like someone who understood the loudest voice in the room usually belonged to the one with the least to say. The check-in. Behind the desk, Corporal Ramos sat hunched over a tablet, his stylus clicking as he scrolled through rosters. Weekend duty boredom weighed down his tone. Sign-in's digital now, he muttered without looking up. He pointed lazily at a scuffed fingerprint scanner bolted to the counter. Kane pressed her thumb to the pad. The light flickered, then glowed green. Ramos finally glanced at the screen, squinting at her name. He tilted his head as if some half-forgotten memory was tugging at him. "You on the sparring list?" "Cleared for it," she said evenly. "No heat. No defense. Just fact." He shrugged, flicked the screen away, and waved her through. "Main floor's open. Gear issues on the left." She gave a short nod and moved past the gate, her duffel swinging against her side. The echo of her boots on polished concrete was swallowed quickly by the ambient noise, the clang of plates, the steady hum of fans, the buzz of voices mixing with the metallic rattle of chains. The reservists. Inside the main hall, sunlight stretched through high windows, spilling long golden bars across the sparring mats. The air was cooler here, but heavy with the tang of rubber and cleaning solution still lingering from the night before. Near the benches, 3 reservists had formed their own loose cluster: Caleb Stroud, Jake Tiller, and Mason Hart. Mid to late 20s, sharp uniforms tucked around sharper egos. They carried themselves with the confidence of men who had been the biggest fish in a very small pond. Their muscles came from training schedules, not carrying bleeding teammates across ground that wanted them dead. Stroud saw her first. He smirked, tipping his chin toward the newcomer. "Look at this. Somebody's mom got lost on the way to yoga." Tiller followed his gaze and grinned. "Nah. Logistics. Check out those sleeves. She probably files push-up reports instead of doing them." Hart snorted, curling a dumbbell with more show than strain. "Paper soldier. Bet she's got a typing speed certificate framed over her desk." Their laughter carried easily, mixing with the clang of weights and the thrum of the fans. The kind of laughter that comes when men think no one's listening, at least, no one who matters. The marks. Kane ignored them. She set her duffel by the wall and unzipped it with methodical care. From inside she pulled plain black hand wraps, cloth softened by years of use. Her motions were calm, precise, habit drilled into bone. She wrapped her left wrist first, snug and steady. The compression sleeve on her forearm shifted slightly, revealing a glimpse beneath. Not ink. Not decoration. Burned-in lines. Thin, uniform, permanent. Stroud noticed, squinting. "Hey, Grandma," he called, voice carrying that sing-song blend of sarcasm and bravado. Silver Sneakers class is down the hall. Kane didn't look up. Her voice cut low but sharp. Good thing. Those are too easy. The laughter stumbled. Tiller forced a chuckle. Cute. But this isn't chair yoga. This is combatives. I wasn't planning to sit down. The words hung in the air like a weight. The men exchanged quick glances, the cracks in their confidence showing for the first time. Hart shifted closer, trying to drag Swagger back into his posture. Look, lady, no disrespect, but this isn't beginner's night. You might be out of your depth. Kane finished wrapping her left wrist and lifted her gaze. Her eyes locked with his, steady, unblinking. The kind of look that made men realize, too late, just how young they sounded. Then it should be interesting. The sparring mats lay in the center of the gym, taped down with military precision. Sunlight painted sharp rectangles across their surface, dust motes dancing in the shafts of light. Around the edges, soldiers paused between sets, drawn instinctively to the space where pride and ego often collided. Staff Sergeant Delaney, clipboard in hand, stepped onto the floor. He had the build of a stone pillar, broad, immovable, with a permanent no-nonsense frown etched into his face. Rotations open, he called out. His voice carried without effort. Light contact. Respect rank. Follow regulations. If you can't do that, find another outlet. Kane finished her wrist wraps and walked to the sign-up board. She picked up the chain-pinned pen, wrote her name at the top, and stepped back with quiet finality. Delaney's brow lifted as he read it. You cleared for this? Her tone was steady. Yes, Sergeant. Not a boast. Not a challenge. Just truth. Stroud had drifted closer, curiosity pulling him like a moth to flame. When he saw her name scrawled on the board, he smirked. She actually signed up. This'll be good. Kane finished her wrist wraps and walked to the sign-up board. She picked up the chain-pinned pen, wrote her name at the top, and stepped back with quiet finality. Delaney's brow lifted as he read it. You cleared for this? Her tone was steady. Yes, Sergeant. Not a boast. Not a challenge. Just truth. Stroud had drifted closer, curiosity pulling him like a moth to flame. When he saw her name scrawled on the board, he smirked. She actually signed up. This'll be good. Kane turned her head and regarded him, calm, unshaken. You're welcome to test that theory. The smirk flickered. But pride is louder than caution. All right, Grandma, he said, trying to make the word sting. Let's see what you've got. Facing off. They squared up in the center of the mat. A hush spread across the gym, the clang of weights momentarily fading as eyes shifted to the duel. Stroud bounced lightly on his toes, rolling his shoulders, putting on the kind of show that played well to friends in a barracks but didn't hold weight anywhere bullets flew. His grin flashed, wide and cocky. Go easy on me, he said, still playing to the audience. Kane stood with quiet stillness. Weight balanced, hands loose at her sides. Not coiled. Not tense. Just present. Like a calm surface hiding an undertow strong enough to drag a man under. The timer beeped. For the first few seconds, Stroud circled, tossing light jabs to test her reflexes. She gave him nothing. Her eyes tracked him, measuring, cataloging every twitch, every lean, the angle of his weight on his feet. Finally, he committed, snapping a quick hook, sharp and confident. Kane moved. The transition was so clean, so fluid, that most watching weren't sure what had happened. One heartbeat he was striking, the next his body was airborne, momentum turned against him. He hit the mat with a thud that silenced the gym. Air burst from his lungs in a ragged gasp. He lay there, blinking up at the ceiling, trying to process the sudden betrayal of his own body. The room held its breath. Stroud rolled to his knees, face red, trying to play it off. Lucky shot. But even as he said it, the lie tasted bitter in his mouth. Nothing about that felt like luck. The reset. He stood again, resetting his stance. This time, no grin. His buddies, Tiller and Hart, had gone quiet at the edge of the mat. He lunged harder, lowering his shoulder in a burst of force meant to bowl her over. Kane shifted, precise as clockwork. One sidestep, a hook of her foot against his leading leg, and his momentum betrayed him again. He crashed down flat, her knee pressing lightly into his chest, her grip twisting his wrist at an angle his shoulder didn't appreciate. "Tap," she said, voice calm, almost conversational. He slapped the mat 3 times in quick succession. She released instantly, stepping back with professional detachment. Stroud sat up slowly, rubbing his shoulder, his confidence cracked wide open. He looked at her like a man trying to reconcile reality with a story he'd been telling himself. The gym had gone utterly still. Respect in silence. Around the mat, the onlookers exchanged glances, some wide-eyed, some knowing. Tiller and Hart stood rigid, their easy smirks gone. What replaced them wasn't fear yet, but something heavier, respect, reluctant and dawning. Kane stepped to the edge of the mat, unscrewed her water bottle, and took a slow sip. Her breathing was steady, calm, as though she'd simply finished stretching. She didn't look at Stroud. She didn't need to. The silence said it all. The main door to Building 12 opened with a pneumatic hiss. Major Thomas Hale, clipboard in hand, stepped into the gym. At 54, Hale carried himself with the kind of authority you didn't need explained, 30 years of service etched into the lines around his eyes. His uniform was neat but not parade ground perfect, it was the attire of a man who worked, not posed. He paused just inside the entrance, scanning the room like a hunter checking the wind. Something was off. The usual morning noise, banter, laughter, idle chatter, was gone. In its place hung a taut silence. By the water cooler, Stroud sat slumped, a towel draped over his neck as he rolled his sore shoulder. Tiller and Hart leaned against the wall, watching the mats with faces that had shed their smirks. And at the center of it all, Evelyn Kane sat cross-legged, rewrapping her wrist wraps with methodical focus, every motion precise, unhurried, unbothered. Hale's eyes narrowed. He turned toward Staff Sergeant Delaney, who hovered with his clipboard, expression unusually uncertain. "What's the situation here, Sergeant?" Hale asked, voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the silence. Delaney handed him the board without meeting his gaze. Unexpected addition to the sparring roster. Signed in herself. Said she was cleared. Hale scanned the names, and froze. His jaw tightened just slightly, the way a man does when puzzle pieces fall into place faster than he'd prefer. "Kane," he said softly. Delaney glanced up. "You know her, sir?" Hale didn't answer right away. His eyes had locked on the woman across the room. She tugged her sleeve slightly to tighten the wrap, and in that moment, the marks on her forearm caught the light. Hale's expression shifted, almost imperceptibly, but enough for Delaney to notice. 9 burned lines. Perfectly spaced. Unmistakable. The wrong joke. Trying to reclaim some shred of control, Tiller called out from the wall, forcing a laugh that fell flat. "She's got those things burned all over, like some wannabe warrior priestess." The words didn't land the way he'd hoped. Hale's head turned slowly, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of steel dragged across stone. "Do you boys have any idea what you're looking at?" The question wasn't rhetorical. It demanded an answer. Tiller blinked. "What, the war paint?" Hart found something urgent to study on the floor. Stroud stayed silent, massaging his shoulder. Hale stepped closer, eyes on Kane, but his words aimed squarely at the 3 reservists. Those aren't tattoos. They're not for decoration. Each one represents a confirmed kill. Scar tissue, burned in because ink doesn't last where she operated. Fire does. The gym went still. The fans hummed overhead, but even that sound seemed muted, swallowed by the gravity in Hale's tone. He gestured subtly toward Kane. Sergeant Evelyn Kane ran point for Echo Recon, Group 7. Deep insertion, black-budget missions in places that don't exist on your training maps. Those 9 marks? They're 9 people who were breathing when she found them and weren't breathing when she left. And that's just the documented ones. The lesson. The reservists stared, color draining from their faces. Stroud dropped his gaze to the mat, his earlier bravado crushed under the weight of truth. You think they let her just stroll in here because she's nostalgic? Hale's voice sharpened. She's got more confirmed kills than most companies rack up in an entire deployment. The woman you mocked as grandma could end your career in less time than it took her to put Stroud on his back, twice. No one laughed. No one spoke. Kane said nothing. She didn't defend herself, didn't elaborate. She simply packed her wraps into her duffel with the same quiet precision she'd shown from the moment she walked in. Hart finally found his voice. It came out small. We didn't know. No, Hale said flatly. You didn't. And that's the first lesson you'll remember today. He let his gaze sweep over them, sharp but not cruel. In this line of work, you never know who you're talking to. That clerk pushing papers might have been a ranger once. That mechanic could have survived more firefights than you'll ever see. And that quiet woman you just dismissed? She's a warrior who's earned scars you couldn't imagine. Exit. Kane slung her duffel over her shoulder and walked toward the door. Hale's voice followed her. Sergeant. She paused at the threshold, glancing back. Still sharp, he said, a note of respect threading through the words. For the first time that morning, something that could almost be called a smile touched her lips. Rust was never the problem. Then she stepped outside, the sunlight casting her shadow long across the asphalt. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. Inside, 3 young men stood in silence, replaying every word, every movement, every mark burned into her arms. They would remember this morning. Whether they chose to learn from it, was their decision. Hale tucked his clipboard under his arm and shook his head. The most dangerous people in the world, he said quietly, are the ones who don't have to tell you how dangerous they are. The door closed behind him. The gym stayed silent.